Tell me the craziest wedding story. It was at my friend's wedding. The bride and groom were very young, 22 or 23 years old. In our country, there is a custom that they should feed each other with a wedding cake and then smear each other's faces with it. The bride made it clear that she did not want to get dirty in the cake, but the groom smeared a decent piece on her face. With screams, she ran to the guest house to put herself in order. Most of the guests went to calm her down, but the groom was not allowed. She came out an hour later. It was clear that she was very angry. The celebration quickly faded away. They divorced 2 years later. The groom began to give a speech of thanks to the guests. But it was clear that he was already throwing himself well, because he began to joke thickly and vulgarly. I didn't know many of the guests. I sat next to elderly relatives from the side of the bride and saw that it was very unpleasant for them to listen to all this. According to the traditions of our country, the groom had to sing an ode to love. But by this time, he could hardly stand on his feet and hardly moved his tongue. The guests demanded that he sing, and I stared at the floor, afraid to laugh. The groom invited all his friends from social networks to the wedding. He claimed that about 700 people should come. Everything was prepared for such a crowd, but less than 100 came. The groom was very upset by this fact. The bride was almost 2 hours late for her wedding. It was in Southern California. It was a hot day, and we were all standing in a clearing under the open sun, where there was no shade, no benches, no water. She showed up in a yoga suit. The groom demanded that she change clothes, and when the bride refused, he announced that there would be no wedding and left. We also went home. I then thought for a long time where to attach the wedding gift. After the wedding ceremony, everyone proceeded to the banquet hall. A traffic jam formed at the entrance because the bride stood at the door and sprayed everyone with her favorite perfume, both women and men. Some complained that the smell made them lose their appetite and went home. I don't know why she did it. Together they sang an oath of eternal love. Both had terrible voices. They also wanted the guests to pick up the chorus. Everything turned out very cringe. Was the manager at one wedding. The bride and groom threw themselves on so much that the groom immediately fell asleep, and they laid him on the sofa, and the bride sat on the lap of one of the guests, wept, and he calmed her down. At the same time, the guests ate and drank imperturbably, made toasts to the young. The pastor who conducted the wedding talked for about 20 minutes about his wife and children. He probably considered his family life ideal and wanted to use it as an example. The bride and groom stood in front of him, holding hands, and pretended to listen, and 150 guests sighed and slowly began to grumble. The men at the end of this crowd lit up. Someone did not wait and opened the champagne.